And we are live. Good. YouTube's up. And I think LinkedIn looks like it's working. See how this goes. LinkedIn streaming is always poor. They have nothing in APAC. Everything is Europe or US. Hopefully, maybe there's just no value. Maybe they'll get something over here. In the meantime, let's go to Big Cam. What we're going to do is just kind of to discuss what's going on. Last week, I really wanted to get involved and have another little live session, but a lot of personal things. You can hear my voice, a little rough. Technically, I probably shouldn't do this today, but I'm stubborn. I also need a break from work. It's got this massive document that I got to work on. Not excited, and so offset motivation, which means after this I'll get back on it. Beyond that, lots of personal stuff, nothing major, but I do have some articles I want to talk about, and then I didn't fix it yet, but I have this Elgato camera. It got an update where it can do like eye tracking and things like that. I want to move the camera maybe to here, like, but the way it is on my monitor, I'm not always happy with the way it is. I feel like I always have to do this. So maybe that's something I can improve. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself so I don't need to hear myself anymore. But I think I got my audio sorted out, and there shouldn't be dual audio coming from the LinkedIn and the YouTube browser and stuff. So I fixed that. And I'm looking at the meter. I'm right around 20 to negative 20 and negative 15, which is quite good. If anybody thinks it's too loud, I don't really get a lot of chat. This really isn't a live stream. It's just for me to wait to create the content and cut down on all the editing. And with that, I'm going to drop off the headphones. All right, great. So first up, I wanted to talk about this article right here, and there's a couple of them. I've got them laid out. If I can't get through all of them, I won't. I'll probably try to go maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, just going over some recent news and giving my cybersecurity expertise in this area, because this is obviously something that not everybody has access to, being a incident responder or dealing with recoveries in massive businesses. So right up, I found this very, very interesting. And I think everybody in their IT career has come across this at some point in time. It's very funny. Whenever we start a new project, we're always meeting a lot of new people at a lot of companies all over the world. So I deal with Asia. And so right now I'm on a Japanese project, but they're a global company. So they have Europe and US people involved. Then after this project, I could go work with Australia, or I could go work with Thailand. So I'm always seeing all these different people and all these different job titles. One of the big things that I've had to do personally a long time ago was ignore titles, right? And I think this is a very big problem in the industry. If you ask somebody what is cybersecurity, you're going to get 100 different answers, right? And even I tackle this, right? Do you feel a project manager who is managing a cybersecurity project is cybersecurity? They're involved in the project, but are they really cybersecurity? Their project manager skills are what's important, not their knowledge of cybersecurity. Now, having cybersecurity knowledge does help maybe in that project, but it's not like a mandatory thing for that project. Whereas if you're doing like an identity project, you need somebody with cybersecurity skills. And I think titles are just crazy. I ran into this plenty of times where I gave up saying, "What is your title?" I like to ask people, "What do you do during your day?" Or what permission you have, what access do you have, what services do you manage? Because I can translate that easier than somebody saying, I am the lead security architect of compliance regulatory in APAC region HQ. And I'd be like, what the hell does half that mean? No, that doesn't mean anything to anybody, right? And I think that's an important thing to distinguish in cybersecurity. When you are looking to hire people, forget titles. See what people do. Ask them what they do. When their hand touches a keyboard, what are you doing? I think that's the most important question to ask when it comes to cybersecurity experts, especially people trying to go. And let's just be honest, we've kind of screwed the industry where everybody needs 3 to 5 years of master's degree experience. And so for somebody at a low level, the title might be what helps them break through the door, but it might not help them in the job. At the same time, we're not helping ourselves with some of these ridiculous things in terms of requirements. So I think this is very interesting. Obviously, this is a Straight Times article. They want you to pay for it full time, but I don't even need to really read the full article. I'm assuming everybody in IT has run into this situation where the titles don't really line up with what people do. And when it comes to cybersecurity, my advice is ask people what they do. Were you a SOC? Okay, when you're in a SOC, what did you do in the SOC? I was an analyst. That can mean a lot of things. Tell me about being an analyst. What was your daily duties? Well, we triaged alerts, we triaged incidents, and we would try to quarantine endpoints and close them. And if we couldn't figure it out, we would escalate to the next level. Next level, they did different things that we couldn't do, more access. Maybe they did reverse engineering, whatever. But the point is, you got to talk to people. Looking at a title is crazy. And I think some people have inflated the title with pay, and it should never be the title is pay. The title should dictate the type of jobs you're looking for. And we really got to take note of this. So when you start looking at people looking at cybersecurity jobs, don't focus on the title early in your career. Focus on the experience, because that's going to get you much further than the title. You could say I'm a AVP and nobody knows what the hell that means at one company. Then the next company, they don't even care about AVP. But if you could say I'm a senior SOC analyst and I've done reverse engineering, that's going to translate to every company. And so focus on the skills, not the title. Okay. So I thought this was just a good article to kick it off with and just give my experience when working with people who really feel about that imposter syndrome at times. This is a big one. So insider threats haven't went away, and AI is just a new hot ticket. It's like, hey, what's sexy today? What's hot today? I'm going to tell you everything about AI, even though you have never wrote a line of code and you're just regurgitating what everybody else has said. Okay. That's the most ridiculous thing ever. I can't stand those people. But let's take a look at this. Insider threats. If we split it in half, take out the word AI. You've always had insider threats, and you've always had developers. And this hasn't changed. It's just right now, if you have developers, there is a higher risk that they are either going to be A, targeted by hackers, or B, themselves will either be hired to steal it, or they are going to just find a good payday real quick to take this and sell it to another company and get hired at that company. We've seen that happen before. I forget, the self-driving car industry had a lot of shakeup with that. I forget what that one person did, but I think he took a bunch of data and priority stuff and went and worked for another company. That's another point. But my point is, this hasn't changed. This is the same exact problem that will be here today for AI. And when we move on to AI, let's say quantum computers come out in 4 years and everybody can literally go buy a quantum computer. The insider threat is going to still exist, right? Now, this is a tough one. And I'm going to give some high-level recommendations when you're dealing with insider threats. Number one, day one, trust is earned. Okay, that's a big thing. I've seen companies that will hire a person to manage Active Directory and give them domain admin day one. And I'm like, what the hell did you just do? Like, you just don't give a new employee domain admin. They have to work themselves up to it. Even crazier is when you outsource that level of permission, your domain admin, your AWS management, your Azure management, you outsource it. And next thing you know, you don't even know that the other company is just churning through staff. And at one point in time, you could have 18 people that you don't even know have access to all of your infrastructure in the cloud. And so there's a level that you can't outsource accountability. You can't really outsource trust. So at the top level, you have to pay for people. And the only way these people don't become an insider is you trust them. But that's because you trust them doesn't mean they're not monitored, right? That's the first thing. Second thing, when it comes to developers, I think you have to do the same type of thing. When you hire a developer, you have to also think about what source code they're going to have access to. What are they going to be doing? Are they going to clone that data down? Very common to clone the repository down, make the changes, clone it back, pull requests back up. And What I would say in that scenario is the same type of thing. They don't need access to your most critical applications day one. When you bring a developer in, you should really focus on a program where you let them work on, you take the people that you trust and move them to that team, and then the other team you backfill, which has less risk to the company, and you can get some time with that person to build up trust to see who they are as a person, right? Now, it doesn't mean time is an enemy. The person you trust today could be very good at the long con, and it takes them 2 years, but then they stab you in the back, right? And so the point with this, and this is really where this article dives into it, and it's worth looking at it. I think we can all know that, and I like this line here. Look, chip manufacturers have always been targeted for implants and trying to break into it and steal the chip manufacturing itself, especially with certain countries wanting to build their own chips and get off of the U.S. chips, which is fair in aspects that some countries want to have more control at the hardware and the software layer. Now, if that's because they're just corrupt as hell towards their citizens, or they are just trying to build better security, that's their choice, right? But when it comes to AI, it's a different, it's a pro and con. First off, the data you train on is always going to be very critical. And if you're going to look at it from a pure cybersecurity perspective, you must first understand the infrastructure that is involved and what type of data is stored within that infrastructure. So when we're looking at, we talk about more advanced businesses and bigger pictures in multiple countries that you have your data in, you have developers everywhere. The challenge is going to be who has access to the training data. Let's start with that, the modeling data. Who has access to that? And you need to keep that limited. And it takes time, because you just can't go out and say, hey, I'm going to go hire me 20 AI specialists, because one, there's not a lot of people out there. Two, they're very, very expensive, and they deserve to be expensive because of what they do. Not arguing on that point. But at the same time, you need to know how many people are accessing this data, who's accessing the data, and limit access to the data. And when you're not training the model, just shut off all access, right? That's one way to reduce that risk, is just only when you need access to it, right? The second thing, once again, limiting who needs access to it. Also, some of this can be a little complicated, but segregation of duties. The person who trains the model isn't the same person who actually writes the code. They could be advising the other developers how to fix that code or what they need to change. And so now you have a separation of duties. So the person who's training the model and finding the problems is a different person than who's writing some of the code and implementing the fixes. That way, and vice versa, the person writing the code doesn't actually have access to the model to manipulate the code the way they want. And so that's something to think about. How do you carve up for the time being within a team whose roles do what, to make sure that there's no way but to use collusion, right? And this is really what it is. When we look at it, Microsoft, Google, big on this. We've actually been using AI inside Microsoft for many, many years. We actually have solutions called insider threat solutions that customers can actually subscribe to. It's quite a good solution, but it takes data to generate what is a threat profile. Why is somebody an insider? Why do they look like they're doing something bad? That's part of it. And so you have to generate enough data on that person to understand how do they work normally? What are they doing, right? And then you have to figure out a way to think of if you accuse somebody and they're not really a bad guy. How do you handle that, right? That is another challenging thing to come up. You just don't want to go around and be paranoid and think everybody's trying to steal from you, right? If you're trying to walk to the mall and think everybody's going to pick your pocket, you're going to have a very bad day, a very bad mindset. Same with your employees. If your employees think they're constantly being surveillanced, and the next thing you know, somebody's going to come up to you and say, you look like you're stealing stuff, get pulled into the office. Rumors are going to fly. And so this is a very delicate balance, not just the fact that you need to have some type of tools to monitor this, but you really need to think of a way to have open discussion with employees, and also think about how this can impact remote work or the office. We'll get to that article. Really think about how this needs to be handled. I personally don't have a lot of experience, with the human side of it. How do you handle this? And this is where you need somebody from HR to come in and say, what are some of the policies we can create when we think we found somebody who's done this, but we can't 100% prove they've done it? What should we do? What type of conversation should we have? And how do we ensure everybody else doesn't say, oh, I'm not going to go to lunch with this guy anymore because I don't want to be associated with him, because they might think I'm also an insider. You see how this can get out of control very, very quickly? So that's my takeaway from this. Personally, I understand the tech side of it, how to lock it down, how to secure it, how to monitor it. But I've been really thinking about the human side of it. And if we don't do this, you could ultimately just destroy your trust, your team, and the communication between everybody, and ultimately end up worse than where you were at, right? So definitely like to hear people's feedback on that. Have they dealt with this situation? Have they ever had any problems with this? Because I would love to hear how people handle those conversations when they think it has been somebody, right? Next up. This one's ridiculous. Oh my God. This is so bad. Dell workers can stay remote, but they're not going to get promoted. Wow. I don't even know where to begin with that. First off, this right here is bad from the fact of a perspective of there are people who just don't need to come to the office, number one. That's just true. And if you have a happy employee, you're going to generate, I would say, a better working relationship with them. Number one, people will kind of maybe work longer than they should, but they're happy about it, right? I'll give an example. I live in Singapore. I think everybody knows that. I don't have a car. Okay, now that's crazy for a lot of people because I grew up in the US and I love cars and I used to go to the racetrack and I still have a car in the US. That's another fun story. But the point is, the US needs a car. And so my brother drives every day to work, 45 minutes or longer in traffic, then gets off, drives back. The amount of impact to the car, let's talk about that, oil changes, tires, brakes, all that crap. Driving in stressful traffic with lots of accidents because people just suck at driving in the US. I mean, then you take it one step further. Got to be on time. And then there's all this tardiness and stuff like that for being late. It's not just getting to work. It's getting ready before work. All the crap that goes into it. Anybody who drives knows how bad it is. And I think this is really even worse. I get what they're doing. I do feel this here is a type of discrimination. And I'm not big on that word. I think discrimination, this is a form of discrimination, saying you two could be the same work, but because this person comes to the office and because you don't, they can get promoted and you can't. What's going to happen is you're going to hire the most people who don't care about getting promoted, but then they also don't care about the company as well, because what's my incentive? Well, if you're not getting promoted, you're not getting paid more. So all you're going to do is get turnkey people who just come in and do, well, a shitty job. And you've ultimately created this on your own by doing this. This is like one of the most awful things that I've seen in a long time. And there's a difference between saying, let's have some hybrid, let's have a couple days in and out of the office and stuff like that. Look, that's understandable, right? Because you need to do those things. But mandating that if you're going full remote or anything like that, you're not going to get this promotions is wrong. And we're not talking about everybody. There are people who need to be in person. That's always going to be true. Like if you are designing chips, I would assume there's times you have to be in the office working together when you're dealing with things you have to touch. But there are going to be people who don't need to be in the office, or even the person who's doing that chip might be doing testing on it. They can fire off the testing, go home, and then do their business type work, like send some emails and crap like that. So nobody is chained to a desk for 8 hours a day. That's the most ridiculous thing ever. And giving people the flexibility where, let's say, for example, I come in and I need to do some testing on a prototype I'm making. I kick off my tests. A lot of these might be automated. I might work for 3 or 4 hours on the test. Then I leave at noon. I go home and I go and pick up my child from school. And maybe I come home and have lunch with my child. And then a few hours later, I go, and remember I work like 4 hours in the morning. A few hours later, I go and drop my son off at soccer. And then I go ahead and start working on emails, communications, and following up with my findings, maybe check my results. And I work 3 or 4 more hours. What's wrong with that? That is the best work-life balance. They'll be the happiest employee. So anybody who thinks this is a good idea is very, very bad. And I'm going to give one more other point. And I raised this up internally a long time ago to one of my managers. And I said, we throw around these words, diversity, inclusion, all these words, but I don't care about the word. I care about the action. And they were saying, we need to get more women in cybersecurity. And I said, okay. I said, so let's talk about one complication that women have that men don't have. If you want to have a baby, you have the time where you're pregnant, and then you have maternity leave, and then you have the time when the baby's born, and you want to spend a lot of time with that child because it's a period of time when they're growing and developing. So I asked my manager, I said, why are you only looking for full-time people? Well, I'm going to say it. Why are you only looking for full-time women? Why don't you look for 2 part-time women? And they do 3 months on, 3 months off, 3 months on, 3 months off. Have you even tried this? Have you even asked? And maybe you're going to, instead of hiring one person, let's just say $100,000, you hire 2 people at $50,000. They have more time off throughout the year. It means they get more family time. Why has this never been adopted? Why has nobody ever tried this? Or have we tried it and it failed? And he goes, no, we've never tried it, but the business wouldn't go for it because the cost of each region, it cost, more to have 2 employees. It costs more. Like Singapore, you have to have a certain number of employees. And I said, well, that's just excuses once again. Why don't you go back to the country and say, hey, can we talk about getting, we're going to hire 2 people but they're part-time. Is there some type of other, employee ID card that we can work with you to create to give more opportunities to women, pregnant women who've just had babies and want to spend more time with their kid, but still keep their career going? Because if they try to come back after 3 years, it's a daunting task to catch up. There's a gap in their resume. So you want to talk about meeting people in the middle? I think this is the most awful thing you can do. And I hope it backfires on them, because other companies will see it and say, oh, this is a good idea. So it's like the idiot making another idiot think they're smart. I just hope they don't do this in the long term. Please don't do this. Please don't put yourself in this situation. Unless you need a job, take it. Otherwise, just avoid this, because you're not going to help your career in the long term, right? This one's a great one. Oh, man. Oh, my God. So right now, if you guys don't know this, there's a lot going on. So I think if you guys have seen New Zealand and Australia, they joined the Five Eye counterparts. So Five Eyes is a big thing over here. Not everybody else really knows about this, but United States, Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, and New Zealand. So smaller countries won't really know about this, but the Five Eyes is the thing where they're looking at this nation state hacking group. Is that big enough on the screen? I think it's probably big enough. And these guys have been a problem for a while. And so, what is really going on here is they're starting to really go after this group and try to really take these guys down. I think that's what's going to be happening with the Five Eyes. So you've got the Five Eyes involved now, and this is going to be how are they going to handle these guys? Because they're really targeted at taking out government systems, right? And it's good to know that this is happening, but the question is, what are the I guess really when I think about this, that industry is quite challenging. If you guys have ever worked at those places, you'll know what I'm talking about. It is very challenging to do this type of infrastructure work, because a lot of the systems can't change, or they're older systems, or there's just so much integration in it. And a lot of times it's hard to put security into that system because it's going to break 20 other systems, right? Some of them have done a good job with air gapping and breaking it up. But at this point, it has gotten so bad that, you have the Five Eyes getting involved and saying, okay, let's start telling telecommunications, water, electricity, energy, that you need to get our help to monitor it, right? We're talking Typhoon's had access to critical infrastructure for at least 5 years in New Zealand, UK, Australia. So the question is, what's everybody going to do about it? And they're really going to have to work together. And I think this is one of those big times where all the countries have to come together and say, well, how are we going to, one, share our data, our findings, so that way we can start getting some better understanding of how these threat actors work, number one. Number two, what do we suck at? Let's just come out and say, where do we suck at? Why can we not get our shit together? What are the excuses? And they are excuses. Some of the excuses are money. This thing's cost $200 million. We just can't throw it away. Okay, good. It's an excuse still. It's a money excuse. So the question would be, well, okay, what do we do? Why is this a problem? What else can we do to offset that? Maybe this device can't go away because it's $200 million. What can we do about it? Can we air gap? Well, it's going to break this and that. And eventually these excuses are why Volt Typhoon is winning. So I really hope not just the Five Eyes looking into this, but starting to work with these infrastructure companies and say, what can we do, right? Now, this is the nice part here. And I think if you work in this industry, you need to jump in on this even if you're not part of the Five Eyes as a country, let's say I was, Singapore, I would be asking myself, how can I work with them? Because all of this infrastructure is important for a country to survive and for their citizens to be safe and prosper. If they can't, they're going to come after you eventually. So how can I contribute to this would be a good part of this to look at it, right? So there's that Raptor service, and I'd definitely take a look at this Raptor service, just what CyberCX has done. I think that's a good thing to be out there to say, hey, what can we do about it, right? And if you're not using CyberCX with their Raptor service, I like that they're building this out so you can understand it and what they can offer. Talk to any of your incident response teams, right? And say, okay, who do I like for incident response? Who do we commonly use? Who's our cybersecurity insurance with? And just talk to them ahead of time and say, what can we do proactively to make sure that when this comes knocking on our door, what are we doing? And that's just how these is. What is your organization's response to what's going on? The Five Eyes isn't going to save you. You're still responsible for your infrastructure. What are you doing to improve that infrastructure? And it's something that's going to take a lot of conversation and a lot of money. You're going to have to start it now, right? I think we have time for one last one. This one, United Health. This has been going on in U.S. for back in February, I think it started. Okay, just for everybody's awareness, I've been in these situations, personally in these situations, meaning I was in the team that was called in where ransomware took out all the healthcare provider in a country, flagged as a national crisis, and people were not getting their cancer treatment. So this is the money side of it. But I think you can always pay the money later. Who cares about that? But the point is, I've been in the situation where people aren't able to get their medicine. They're not able to get their health care that they need. So if they die, then they can't pay it. So who cares about the payment stuff? Now, this is still an important part of the system, right? Especially when you have insurance involved and stuff like that. My point is, I know what this is like trying to work 10, 12-hour days to help the country get their systems back up from a ransomware so that people can start getting their cancer treatment. So I've been in the thick of this in real life. So I'm not your normal IT guy. I know what the hell this is like behind closed doors, how stressful it is, how bad it is, and what you have to do it. Look, it's good to see that they're on the way back up, that a lot of the services have been restored. The main companies involved with this have been Google-Mandiant and Palo Alto. I have a ton of friends over at Google. Hey, my Mandiant friends, love you guys. But the point is, I know the friends that work over there. We all do this type of work and respect how much effort and time that they've had to do into it. A complete rebuild is going to take, depending on how bad it is. Obviously, I don't have the inside track because I'm not on this project. And if I was, I still couldn't tell anybody because it'd be under NDA. But a complete rebuild of the system. One thing people forget about this one. This is an important one for anybody who's never really done cybersecurity recovery work. I'll see this plenty of times when people say, "Oh, we have the backup," and I'm like, "Oh, we're restoring from backup right now." And I'm like, "Okay, let me ask a question. If the hacker's been in your environment for 60 days, let's say we assume based on logs, where are you restoring your backup from? 4 days ago. How do we know that backup's trusted? How do we know that backup doesn't have the implants and it's a trusted backup?" So a lot of people have this mentality, and it's not their fault, but IT people assume their backup is good. And that backup, from its own perspective, if it restores the data, it's good, but it could also restore the implants, or it could restore the ransomware package, right? So my point here is complete rebuild. When they say that, a lot of times it takes much, much longer to restore an impacted system as opposed to a system that crashed, because you have to go back and validate that those backups aren't bringing malicious things back into the environment. Okay. True story. 100% true story. Here's another one. Here's another true story from my book of IT. This one was interesting. I went and I was at a customer site, and we were just brought in passively because they had another vendor who was there. This vendor was not a security expert team. They knew what the hell they were doing. They were pure infrastructure people. And they were just, the customer's like, get the environment back up. Okay. And this was like a Thursday or something. And I'm sitting there in the room listening to this crap because I could just tell, you could tell in a few minutes who the hell knows what they're doing and who doesn't. Right. I'm sitting there. I'm like, all right. So I walk I walk out the room and I go over to the CISO, this nice lady, and I said, look, I think you're going too fast. You haven't analyzed anything. We don't have you don't have enough data to really make a proper plan on how to execute forward all weekend. So I go home, and I think I had other teammates who took over for the weekend. I was coming back Monday morning, and I guess the other vendor was restoring all the systems all weekend long. Supposedly they got it back up like late Sunday night, Monday morning, like 3 a.m. or something. So I wake up, I'm in a taxi heading over there, and I get a call from the Microsoft person, and he goes, yeah, Joel, everything just got ransomware a second time. I was just like, oh my God. I was like, I called it. I hate being right. It's not about being right, but I was right. I told you what we didn't have enough knowledge to know what we're doing. Is it going to, so literally all the weekend wiped out Monday morning. So I get in there, and the CISO pulls me into the office, and she says, look, you mentioned this on Thursday or whatever, Friday. I know the other vendor is there. Can you go in, anything you see, bring it to me right away that is a risk, and I will go in there and sort this out. Because I can't tell the other vendor, well, shut the hell up. You don't know what you're talking about. Sit down and just listen. That'll solve the problem, obviously. But I said, sure, not a problem. So I went back in there, listened for a little bit, went back to her and was like, look, here's the top 5 things that need to be done now with just seeing what's happened. It was crazy. And for anybody curious how it happened, I'll end on this one. Do I want to do the last article? I'll end on this. So yeah, I'm just going to end here. We'll go back to the pool cave. So anyways, anybody curious how this happened? The malicious stuff happened in their test environment. Now, most customers or companies, their test environment, either A, they just don't have a test environment because nobody gives a shit about testing. Do you have a test environment? Well, it's somewhere over there and nobody's logged in 6 months, right? It doesn't match production. So it's not really test. The companies that do have good test have probably adopted some type of DevOps framework. And so they're deploying the code into a UAT, into a test, maybe pre-prod, and then it finally rolls into production, right? Safely, right? Well, they were using Azure, so they had Azure Dev Test environment, right? And which is good. I mean, they're doing the right thing. And so the dev test, whatever works, gets moved into production. Okay. The mistake they made was 2 major mistakes. One, the identities for production and test are the same identities. So in theory, even though you say these systems are test, they're connected to the production environment because of the identity. So it's actually one giant infrastructure. And we know most people treat test like shit. Oh, we're not going to patch it. We're not going to put GPOs on it. We're not going to secure it. So it gets treated pretty awful. And so, well, if I was a hacker, I'm going to take the easy way in. And so that's what happened to them was their test environment got blasted. So what they do? They shut down the test environment. They just shut it down because it wasn't critical, and they started rebuilding production. Now, if anybody uses cloud services and you have any type of test systems or VMs you want to save cost, what do? Auto start, auto shutdown. So, what happened 8 a.m. Monday? Any guesses out there? I'll wait. Put your comment. The answer is this. The auto start turned on at 8 a.m. Monday because that was the schedule. And guess what happened at 8 a.m.? Well, that ransomware said, hi. Oh, there's new servers over there. I'm going to go slap the shit out of them and I want to take them out. And it just spread like that. So by 8:30, bam, all their work gone. Right? And once again, it was just working too fast without enough knowledge. Right? And that was my key that I always tell people in cybersecurity. You can't trust your backups till you verify them. So how do we trust backups? Well, not a perfect answer. The way we typically do this, it's not like this is a secret recipe, right? The way we advise is try to isolate a segment to restore the servers to. And then when it's in that isolated segment, either A, open it up to your EDR only, so it has some connectivity to the EDR solution, put your agents on there, run vulnerability scans against it, and see what level of trust on it, do a full AV scan, whatever you need to do to say that, hey, okay, now we kind of trust this server after the restore. We don't see it trying to communicate out anywhere, do anything nasty. We're not finding any of the hashes on it, none of the implants we found. And we can say, okay, cool. Then a lot of times you shut those systems down, their VMs, and bring them into production and then reattach them to production. So you see, this is why I said restoring compromised systems take so much longer, because the question isn't that the server crashed and you're just trying to restore the data from backup. The question is the systems were maliciously accessed, and can you trust that backup is a trusted backup, not for the data, but for the system itself, right? So you have to do two things. So, well, look, with that, this one was just me wanting to go over some articles. I thank anybody who checked it out or stepped in here. I have some big things coming. So from my thing, I'm working with one of my other colleagues, Mr. Ziggy, just in case you see this. Hey, buddy. We are going to be doing a lot of Copilot for security training. So part of our job is to get the rest of this region ramped up in the technical side of the product, which is going GA. And I'm really curious how this is going to work. I have mixed feelings on it. You know, it's crazy to say that you work in Microsoft, everything should be the best. I have mixed feelings about it. And I want to explain that maybe on a video in the future. I've been doing a lot of M365 Copilot internal stuff as well, trying to get people using it more, understanding it more, and how to write good prompts. As you guys, last video I did that prompt on how to order McDonald's is like writing a good prompt. There's some cool stuff coming out with prompts, and I might end up doing like a good session on material and research and things you can use to use it. The problem is not a lot of companies have, big companies are looking at it, but smaller companies and normal people really don't have access to this at a cost-effective measure today. That's part of the downside to it. And I still have the tier model stuff. I want to go back and talk about tier 1 in the near future. There's not a lot of people who are good at tier 1, and I got to be crystal clear on that. You think tier 0 is tough? No. Tier 0 is easy. It's easy. Tier 1 is extremely, extremely difficult. And I do want to set aside an episode where I just kind of use 30, 40 minutes and talk through tier 1 and a framework that Matt and myself have developed. So Mr. Matt, another good friend of mine, we came up with a framework of how you can do tier 1 migrations into the tier model that we think is repeatable for a lot of companies. But it's not for the faint of heart. So I've got some things in the work. If anybody wants to hear any of those things, just drop it on LinkedIn, drop it on YouTube, whatever, comment saying, hey, that sounds like a really good topic. You want to hit it up, and I'll look into it and do it. And with that, thank everybody for checking in, saying hi. Hope you liked the video. Hope this format is working, so I don't have to do as much editing. It's so awesome not editing. And with that, I will see you guys next Wednesday, hopefully. And don't work too hard remotely because you're not going to get promoted. So take care, everybody.